Hi, everyone. This is Ray Lusson from the Creative Activist Turning Pain to Purpose. And today I'm just going to start with a little poem. This is where we begin. With a crack in the silence, a flicker of light, a story long held now stepping into sight. This is where trauma is transformed into healing and purpose. Through story, through art, through brave hearts who choose to speak, to feel, to create. Come as you are, no mask, no shame. Your voice is welcome. Your healing has a name. This series is really close to my heart. I started it really because I'm sharing my healing journey from sexual abuse. I created this platform to open up healing toolbox and share powerful practices, people, and pathways that help me transform my pain into purpose. This series is about highlighting survivors, healers, change makers who are turning their lived experiences into acts of service, creativity, and social impact. Today, I am honored to speak with Erica Hornthal, also known as the therapist who moves you. Erica is a licensed clinical professional counselor therapist, board certified dance movement therapist, and the founder of Chicago Dance Therapy. She's worked with thousands of people, including me, and helped them reconnect with their bodies and reframe movement as a powerful tool for mental health and emotional healing. Welcome, Erica. So good to have you.
Hi. Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So why don't we just start a little bit about your personal journey? Why, dance movement therapy? What was there about that for you that resonated?
Well, growing up, I'd always danced. I've always been a dancer. I still am. And although I believe once a dancer, always a dancer, so you don't have to actively be engaging in it. But when it came time to figure out my career path, I really, really did not want to let go of dance in my life. It was the one common thread. It was the thing that always got me through things. It's when I feel the most myself. And yet, the only things presented to me were dance educator, performer, choreographer, which are amazing, but I knew that they weren't for me. They were not in the cards for me. And I didn't know what that was going to look like. I remember kind of holding on to dance as a major, even though, again, I knew that that's not really where my heart was. And it was thankfully through that path in my undergraduate freshman year of college where a advisor, the dance chair of the department, recognized that I was interested in psychology and that I was obviously on this dance track, but not really feeling it in the ways that maybe other majors were feeling it. And she presented me with the field of dance movement therapy. She herself was not a dance movement therapist, but she had been working with some of them. She was creating the dance and medicine program at University of Florida, which is now the arts and medicine program. So she was very familiar with it, even though she herself was not a practitioner. And that was the first time anybody had uttered those words to me, dance movement therapist, even dance therapy. I had never really heard that phrase. I heard dance as therapy or dance is my therapy. I was really familiar with retail therapy and even chocolate therapy, but not so much dance therapy. So I went back to my dorm room and Googled it and found the American Dance Therapy Association. And I pretty much declared myself a psych major that day. Made sure that I took all of my courses and classes and then went on to get my master's in dance movement therapy. And so it was a very streamlined process, not really this uh, aha moment. It was just like right time, right place. And the person who needed the information was there, and the person to give me the information was there. So it wasn't a second career. I got to do it right from the start. So I'm
Oh,
so grateful
fabulous.
to her for yeah, for
Okay,
telling
well,
me about
I'm
it.
familiar with the arts and medicine program because I've interviewed Mary Rockwood Lane, who did it at
Hmm.
Shands Hospital, and has continued to expand that program over the years. So it's like, oh, I didn't even
Yeah.
know that connection there. So
Yep. Yep.
so it's really wonderful. I am totally involved in that. So something you said dance got you through things. Can you just
Mhm.
explain what does that mean to you? Give us an example. What did dance do? How did it get you through something?
So this is actually kind of what I start talking about in my book Body Aware is I didn't even realize, but dance kept me moving through times when maybe I wouldn't have moved in those ways myself. So, I think back to like when I was in school, like, I don't know, middle school, high school, whether it's bullying, not measuring up to what I thought my, perfectionistic qualities should have been, right? Like getting an A+ rather than getting that B, right? Or something. So anytime that I shrunk, anytime that my body felt not good enough, or my mind told my body, this isn't good enough, I would go to dance class. I would show up at that studio and I would have to be bigger. I would have to expand. I would have to emote in some way that would let me move through this place of constriction and tension and tightening and weighted pressure. So that for me is what dance continues to be. For many years, it was a mask, it was escape, it was hiding, it was a persona. But I think from about college on, dance has really been for me. It is a way for me to show up when the world kind of has other plans and when my mind wants to be small and shut my body down. But physically, I know that I need to express myself in some way.
Oh, I love that. And our lives have been parallel on some level because I've used the arts that way. And when I'm
Hmm.
just going to jump in, I went to Erica for about a year. And, my body was the enemy for so long, because as being sexually abused is like I put on a lot of weight. I didn't want to be in my body. I would be out there above, thinking of other things when I was having sex. And this was an opportunity to embody, and get back inside my body, just as you were saying. And what I appreciated so much about your therapy was you knew I was an artist. And so we actually added a component of visually, I would do an art piece as well, not just
Mm.
dance. And I think, and that was one of your gifts was being able to help me embody my body, be inside
Hmm.
without judging it, and learning to move because I didn't have that body awareness. So why don't we talk about body awareness and what it does
Sure.
for people when especially when they're in pain, and they're hiding behind their body, or hiding outside of their body, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I also just want to say that creativity in so many senses, and I mean, it all involves movement, right? Whether it's like putting paper to pen, whether it's the spark of creativity, the thought, right? Like movement creates these sensations that allow us to think and mindfully be creative, right? So it's all movement to me.
Right,
So
right. Yeah.
so
Well, I
no
have
matter
to
what
tell
you're
you,
engaging in, right?
right. And maybe we should talk a little bit more about what the movement classes might look like first. I'm sorry.
Mm.
My mind is just sort of like, I love all this stuff because,
No,
I
no.
was in
I love
shock.
the idea of body awareness.
Yeah, because I couldn't believe it. You had me using ribbons and I was doing that. And I still have
Mhm.
my hula hoops, and I use them
Yep, yep.
with my grandkids, but there were so many ways to get back into my body that I was surprised and it was fun. It wasn't like, oh my God, this is painful, so go ahead.
Mhm.
Sorry.
No, no. Well, to speak to your point about body awareness, right? I think that you have to start where the person is, right? You have to start, and this is a key component of therapy, right? Starting where your patient client is in the moment. And so often that is a thought process, right? But as somatic embodied movement therapists, we want to start from body. So it isn't necessarily you becoming aware of the internalized sensations, which can be very overwhelming to someone who is trying to disconnect from their body, right? Or has had so many years of the ability to disconnect that just the slightest sensation is overwhelming. So, just bringing in the curiosity, right? What are we aware of in this moment? That can be something like proprioception, which is just where we are in space. How close are you to the chair? How does it feel to be sitting in, the sofa? Or let's try different surfaces. Do you notice how it feels to have your bottom sitting on a hardwood floor versus sitting on a soft cushion? So it doesn't have to be this jumping right into what does it feel like to be in my body and what are the sensations coming up, because there's a reason that we've shut that off, and to open up the floodgates. Not that it's not necessarily a more secure place to try it, right? In hopefully what feels like a safer place, like a therapeutic office. But we don't know. I don't know what's going to happen because I'm not in your body, and you might not know what's going to happen because you haven't felt it in so long. So we have to start at very tangible, accessible ways of accessing what we are aware of. And that's been my whole MO for a long time. Is just how do we simplify, go back to sensation. What was it like when we were first kind of born, infant movements? And then slowly we can engage in these more complex movement habits and patterns, ultimately recognizing what it feels like to be in our bodies. And creativity is like the way to do that. It is
Right.
the path in. It is the original language, right? That
Right. And I
we
talk
all
about,
used to know.
right. And I do scribbles and doodles with people because that is another
Hmm.
way in. And your expression and your movement can be big, it can be small, and it's simple. It's not like it is basic
Absolutely.
root. It is one of the basic movements that we do as children.
Hmm.
We learn to scribble. That's it. And so that is part of my creative path when I've worked with clients as well, because I recognize without knowing it at the time when I started doing this, I didn't know what somatic response was. I didn't realize I stored the trauma in my body. And this was a
Right.
way to get it out. And there are many ways, but your work is it is so powerful when you do that.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to share, some universal patterns maybe that you've seen how people carry and release pain through movement. Maybe tell us a story about somebody young and somebody old, because you've worked with everybody.
Sure. Well, I was telling the story yesterday, actually, so it's fresh in my mind. This was several years ago, and it was a young woman. I would say, if I can recall, maybe or like early 30s, married. She had a young child. The story was she felt like she really lost herself, that she herself identified as she used to be a dancer, really enjoyed dance. And then when marriage and family came along, she feels like she really lost her identity, and was eager to get back in touch with that. And movement seemed like the way to do that because that's a huge part of where she felt herself. And so in our first session, I would say, just kind of an intake, we go through some movement assessment and I'm just asking questions and she's telling me a little bit more about herself. And the phrase bending over backwards came up. And so I cataloged that, and we hear of that as kind of like people pleasing, which is what she mentioned. And, I've always bent over backwards. I bend over backwards for people and I really want to set boundaries. I want to take better care of myself. Okay, great. So we start to work and I say, oh, wait, by the way, are there any injuries I should know about? I'm not a physical therapist. We're not doing elaborate movement, but that's a body story. And I just always want to know, are there any physical wounds or injuries, something that I should know about that that may influence your ability to move, right? So she said, oh, I have a quote, bad back. Right. I love this phrase because anytime a body part does not perform the way we think it should, we call it bad. So she had a bad back. And she said, I'm hypermobile. As a kid, I was always doing back bends, splits, all that stuff, right? And I was like, oh, okay. And then it just kind of came to me, and I asked her, do you think there's a correlation between your bad back and bending over to please people? And she just paused for a moment and she started to cry. And so I kind of stepped back and I'm like, oh, like, oh, we've hit on something, right? Um, and so I think that for me, without even having moved, so to speak, this is how we move emotionally. The story of overriding my own boundaries, not knowing when too much is occurring in my body, being flexible as kind of a performance or an art form versus our body saying, this isn't natural. Just because we can do it doesn't mean we should. She had overridden her own boundaries, physical and emotional, so much that she was doing it with other people. So we started by using our body to set limits, right? I know you can touch your toes. I want you to go to the point right before that. I want you to just stay touching your knees. I want you to sit on the floor and just, reach, but not for performance or purpose, but just because it feels good for you. And it was game changing in so many ways. Like, I still think of that as like, wow, it's obviously an example I use a lot. Um, you want me to give another example or
Oh,
you want to?
as you said, hypermobile. I have two granddaughters who are hypermobile and who can
Yeah,
do all
it's
these
a
things,
lot of people are. Yep.
and I had never heard that term before, but it also affects other parts of their body because they don't necessarily have the awareness when to stop. And I think we need, just like you're talking about with boundaries, one's a gymnast, one's too little. She hasn't decided. She's only 6.5, but the other is, going to be 12. And, as a gymnast, she's got fear. She's not strong enough, she can do it. So, again, I think so much of body awareness. I think there's other reasons that people need to be aware of their body, just like,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I'd love for you to talk about that. So,
Yeah.
why? What are the benefits of being aware of your body? Just like you were talking about with this woman, I'd love to
Hmm.
hear another story maybe and that, talks about that.
Well, to go to the point of what you said, like why is this necessary? Is because it's important for us to know where our bodies end and where someone else's begins. Because then this lends itself to things like, again, boundaries, consent, right? Yes, no. If we're too young and some are not too young, if we're young, emotionally or physically, and someone um, takes advantage of, right, our boundaries, then we don't get a felt sense of what they are, right? And so we kind of can live in this existence where it's someone else's choice, right? Someone else decides what I do and don't do with my body. And that's not a fault of our own, right? It's not our fault for that happening. It's someone else's overbearing, right? Power over us that gets silenced. So if we don't have the opportunity to really feel the boundaries of our body, we might not get the opportunity to reclaim what is rightly ours, right? And what feels good for us and what doesn't. So, I mean, just a very brief example, right? I do this with a lot of clients where we just take our hands and we push into the wall. And that, for the first time, for a lot of people, is the first time that they can actually tangibly feel what is them and what isn't them. And something that is not going to give in, something that doesn't, mold to them, but also something that doesn't take advantage of them either, right? The wall doesn't come back and push on you or, take you over. It is there to support you. And for the first time, again, a lot of clients get to start to feel the borders, the boundaries of their body. And developmentally, when we feel the boundaries of our body, we can psychologically set boundaries later on. So, for a lot of my clients that have come, and this is not uncommon, a lot of us have problems with boundaries today. How to say no, how to say yes, when to walk away. We ghost, right? Which isn't really a boundary. But um, you have to have this experience of where I end and where something else begins, right? And so that's just, taking a finger and just rubbing the boundaries of your skin, right? Um, it's been really powerful, a very small intervention, but really powerful for people to feel the reverberation, the feedback, what it's like to feel supported in a strong way, but not having to give in or not having to, show up in any other way, just how they are in this moment, leaning into something that has their support.
I love
Um,
that.
it's
Well,
yeah, it's harder. It sounds harder than it is, but this is something we're all born with. We
right.
just the environment shapes us, right? Shifts us. Our families
Especially,
are
up to age 7 for sure. They've documented how,
100%.
whatever thoughts, whatever teacher said to you, if you're saying that your kid, they're klutzy or they're this or they're that, that's the words they're hearing over and over and saying to themselves. Yes.
Yep.
I want
Yep.
to talk to a little bit about grieving and using your body to express grief and loss. I think because so many of us, we even if it's just a dream we had, to be if you wanted to be that prima ballerina and you just never did, or,
Mhm.
you've experienced a personal loss, somebody you're close to, or a loss of yourself. How do you use that for that? How do you use movement for that dance?
Yeah. Well, it's important to remember, it's funny, I had a conversation about this yesterday too. It's important to remember that this is the origins of expression in terms of something maybe like grief or loss or celebration or prayer or ritual. Before we had formal words, there's proof that earliest cave paintings, right, were images of people dancing, moving their body, not just to celebrate, but to grieve, to grieve the loss, famine, right? Drought, the loss of the tribal leader, So I love that you said loss of self. I think that's a lot of grieving unintentionally that my clients do is realizing that either they are not who they've been told they need to be, or there's the realization of, I need to walk away from this identity, right? Sometimes that's a chronic illness, a diagnosis,
Right.
something that someone's told us about us, right? Where my favorite is when people are like, I'm anxious. I'm an anxious person, right? Not I have anxiety,
Right.
because these parts of us, these symptoms, right, become part of our identity. And without them, we don't know who we are. So it makes it that much harder to get rid of, not that we can get rid of anxiety, but like to let go of the hold that these symptoms have on us. So movement, dance, if you will, is like the original way of doing that. It is just one, a way to regulate our nervous system, right? Dispel any excess energy or tension or energetic, I don't know, composition stuff that the body's holding. And then it can be this metaphor, this moving metaphor where we can use the body to symbolize the letting go. We can play out a story through movement or dance. We can express, a word or something that's too deep for words by moving our body in a certain way. And that symbolizes the loss, the grief. We can also just identify where we feel the word grief, or the situation that we're in. Some people, that's a pit in their stomach, a hole in their heart, a broken heart, uh,
I totally
whatever it
get
is
that.
for you, right? And
And
then
I
we
do that
can we
with
can
art.
use
So
that.
I'll
Yeah,
have them draw their parts of their body, what aches, what is it, what color, what texture, is it cold or hot, and they have a dialogue with it. So, we
yeah,
do it in different ways, but we're still trying to get to that space so that people will have opportunities to change how they feel and take charge of their lives instead of it
yep,
always being circumstances in the past. I want the people to feel free, that they have possibilities. And I think that's what
yeah,
you're giving to people is opportunities to be
yeah.
possible, whatever they'd like to be.
For
And
me, it's moving differently to think differently,
right.
So how are you showing up in your grief? Notice that, become aware of that. And what would it look like to move through different parts of it, right? The anger, the denial, the acceptance. Doesn't mean we're letting go of it, but we're giving it space to breathe.
Well, and I think too, as I've learned over the years, it dance also energizes us and it allows us to learn better. That's why so
Hmm.
many conferences begin with dancing because there's scientific fact that they've studied, and it's been published in, New England Journal of Medicine. And I always try and get people up and move because there is something about that. And it's the same thing. Like before I always get on a call, I dance first and then I get up and do a power pose and I'm moving around, and it's doing that.
Yep,
So it's the same thing that we have opportunities to change how we feel through movement, through
yep.
dance. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of it, but we're going to make them aware of it. So,
Yeah, yeah. It's funny, we do it without even realizing it,
right.
but quite literally the fastest way to shift your mood is to shift your body. And I appreciate what you said about the scientific facts, right, about dance is that we retain information better, we remember better when we move our bodies, we learn better when we move our bodies. So, yeah, if you can add a gesture or a movement to some fact that you're trying to learn, you will actually not only learn it faster, but you will retain it, which is one of the reasons I love working with older adults with cognitive or memory impairments because we can create new memories through the body. How they're accessed may be different. They may not be able to verbalize it in the way we want or they want, but we can actually create new connections simply by moving our body, even when cognition is not working in the ways we'd like.
Right. Oh, that's so beautiful. So, we're coming towards the end. So, I'd love
Mhm.
for you to just share what is one practice somebody could do for themselves today to connect with themselves in a deeper way?
I love this question. Well, I mean, I go back to the example I gave earlier of just you and a good old wall. This is, I think, and it's an accessible one, but it comes up time and time again. So I'll give two actually. One is just, again, going up to some firm surface, whether it's a door, closed door, a wall, glass if it's going to support you, and just give yourself the opportunity to just put your hands against it, push into it, lean into it. If hands don't feel appropriate or accessible, you can also just lean your back against it and just feel the surface supporting you. If you prefer to lay down, you can do it on a hardwood floor. You can do it on a softer surface, but again, it's a little harder to recognize the boundaries of your body when it kind of molds to something soft. So a firmer surface is better to start off. And then if you've already done that and you're like, oh, I've heard this before, the other one that I've been leaning on, pun intended, is going on all fours if it feels okay for you. Put something under your knees or your wrists to support them if you need to. But rather than, it's almost as if you were going to push back into a child's pose, right? As if your bottom was going towards your heels. Before you get to that, you're just rocking. You're just rocking your momentum, your shoulders forward and back while on all fours. This is called the yield push pattern. And what this does is helps with something like motivation, momentum, decision making. Excuse me, I can't speak. And again, I go back to like that initiation. Am I having trouble initiating, deciding, getting up, doing something? We don't have to do, but just this gentle push pull gives us that innate developmental rhythm, that pattern that we developed when we were much younger, to recognize when we need to sit back and relax and recuperate and when we're ready to move forward into the world. So,
Love.
between those two, those are my favorites.
All right, that's great. So let's talk about your books and how people can get a hold of you, your new book. Share with them about your cards, your books, everything right now. So,
Yeah, sure. You know what? I don't here. I actually have. Okay, so I'm like surrounded by it right now. Well, so Body Aware, it's just a poster from the book I released a couple years ago. That to me is like the methodologies, the theories, more about dance therapy, why it works, why it's needed. Very self-helpy. So if you're looking to rediscover and understand the mind-body connection, that's a good one to pick up. Body Talk, which is the newer one that just came out this week. This is like your daily practice. This is your I need someone, I need a coach. I need someone that's going to tell me every day what's one thing, one way I should move so that in 10 days, a month, an entire year, I'm literally changing my relationship to my body. I'm able to talk to it and listen to what it has to say. And then card deck that you were talking about, the movement therapy deck. Um, this is good for anyone, but the purpose of this originally was for someone in it, in crisis, in trauma, someone who is completely disconnected from the felt experience because of something that they are currently going through. The inspiration, unfortunately, was for the tragedy in Highland Park a couple of years ago, just noticing that people were so frozen in the fear of that day that rather than just going and talking to someone, which is also important, they needed a way to move through and feel secure and stable in their bodies to start to reinitiate that sense of safety. So, between those three resources, there is something for everyone.
oh, I love that. So what would you love your legacy to be?
Oh, I think professionally, I would love for the legacy to be that how you move has everything to do with who you are. And if you want to change aspects of your thoughts, your behavior, your intentions, You have to look at how that is wired through the body. Change your thoughts to change your mind, right? Change your mind by using new movements. Change your body, change the way that you're showing up in the world. I think personally, I want my legacy to be that of passion. That if you have a passion for something, it is always worth pursuing. Um, it doesn't always mean that it's going to be the complete bread and butter, but passion leads to meaning, leads to purpose. And I think that gives us a greater understanding and connection in the world and to ourselves. So something that you want to wake up for every day. Follow your passion.
Thank you, Erica. I think it's reminding us that movement is not just an expression, it's a language of healing and
Mm.
change and passion and purpose. Just you said it beautifully. Your work embodies the spirit of creative activism. You're someone who's daring to lead with compassion, curiosity, and courage, helping others turn their pain into purpose. So thank you so much for being here. To those
Mm.
watching, may this conversation inspire you to listen more deeply to your body, honor what it holds, and explore movement as a powerful form of truth-telling and liberation. Until next time, keep creating, keep healing, and keep showing up for yourself and your story. Thank you.